Hi, I'm Magda from Wnętrza Zewnętrza. In this episode, we'll spend the day together and I'll answer your questions. The previous episode, which was kind of a Q&A, stirred up quite a bit of emotion. So now, to lighten the mood, we'll first go to the storage room. Welcome to my storage room, which right now is simply in the garage. Thanks. I'm afraid you won't see too much because I took a portrait lens. It's quite narrow and there's nowhere to move here since it's just a garage. But on the other hand, maybe that's better because it's not perfect here. This isn't a showroom. It's really just a garage. There's even a sink left in the corner somewhere. I didn't repaint the walls because the move was kind of rushed and chaotic. Anyway, now it's already professional. I have these big wide shelves that can hold a lot of books. It'll be a year soon since I've been here, and I have to say, I really appreciate it. At the very beginning of the store, right after the release of the album Polski Wnętrza, I used the services of a shipping warehouse, and back then it was actually convenient. There were a lot of shipments, and I also had a lot on my mind with other things related to the book's release and promotion. So if I had to prepare space for all those pallets and handle all the shipping back then, it probably would have just been a bit too much for my modest capabilities. But then things calmed down and a few issues started to bother me, among others. Like when someone asked for a dedication, I had no way to do it, and everything was happening as if it was out of my hands. These are also fixed costs. And I don't want to put that kind of pressure on myself that I have to have really high sales every month. I just want to treat it as something extra, more relaxed. What's more, this isn't my first online store, so I already had experience running one. My very first store actually had one room in my house that served as a warehouse. And that was, well, in its own way a bit inconvenient, I won't deny it, but also in its own way nice because there was this closeness to everything. And now when I have everything close by again, I really appreciate it. And honestly, I love packing the parcels myself. When I go away and someone else does it for me, I always feel a bit sorry about it. Here on this shelf I have outlet albums, and over there on the other end there are also other titles in outlet editions. However, as you can see now, there are mainly the types of the first and second albums left, and at the beginning there were 4. Back then, there was simply more of those really badly damaged books that got ruined somehow during transport. Or when my bookshelf fell over, yes. That's what happened. It fell over and pulled another one down with it, so it was a disaster. Luckily, most albums were still on the pallet then, since operations had just begun here. But still, some of the books got damaged, and that's why they also ended up in the outlet. And now it's mostly publishing imperfections because I believe that in the case of an album, appearance is really crucial. And I don't want to sell you books at full price when I can see that something isn't quite as it should be. Actually, I can show you. Here we have the outlet. First category, there's this little dot. Do you see it? It's a tiny detail really, but that's the first category. These albums are still quite expensive, but here I have the second category. And look, there's a little smudge at the bottom here, and this mark is, not really great. For a gift, for example, that's why their price is lower. And since we're here by the books, I'll show you something down here as well. I have albums that are also very nicely published. Big ones. Apparently people prefer large albums, which is a bit surprising to me because the big ones are uncomfortable to browse through. Maybe people buy them as gifts because the big ones seem more impressive. Let me know if I publish more albums, do you prefer a medium format or a large format? But this album surprised me because it has ads inside. Just like in a magazine, and yes, ads in magazines are normal in periodicals, in newspapers. I mean, I'm used to them. Yes, I didn't expect it in a book, so it's an interesting solution. There's even a sponsor's logo on the spine. Interesting option. Honestly, let me know in the comments what you think about it. How would you feel buying an album that has ads inside? I wrote that in the description on the website so that everyone is aware of what they're buying and won't be disappointed later. And on one hand, yes, it has great content and it's an amazing book, but on the other hand, I don't know, my feelings are a bit mixed. If that wouldn't bother you, I think it could be a great way to lower the price. Because this album, even though it's bigger than mine, so its printing probably costs more or about the same depending on who made it, it's cheaper, and I think the price is also key for you. Would you prefer to pay a bit more without ads or a bit less with ads? I'm waiting for your opinions. Alright, it's time for questions. And here at the beginning I see some heavy topics, like divorce. Why don't I know anything about it? Exactly, that's the problem with the internet. Only some things actually reach you. And sometimes it happens that I repeat something several times, and one person is already fed up, thinking, how many times can you say this? While another person, even after hearing the information for the 10th time, is surprised because they've never heard about it before. And I shared a lot of information about the album I released, about the ebook, and then sometime later I did a survey. Who knows that I released such books? And a lot of people on Instagram didn't know, so, well, I don't know how that's possible, but that's how it is. So I encourage you to follow the channels with the bell to stay up to date, and let's move on. Do you have low self-esteem? Well, I don't think so, but for sure opinions from outsiders are divided. I've noticed that some people, all those who create online and share their interests or their lives, are sometimes judged as having low self-esteem. That they seek applause, that they need this external approval to feel good about themselves. I don't think that's true. I believe that the internet is a tool. If we want to make the world a better place, if we want to reach people who are interested in similar topics, if we want to run a business or reach customers, well, you just can't do that by shutting yourself away within four walls. And just like when you're reading a book and you come across a nice passage, it's nice to share it with someone. And usually it's the person closest to you, your partner, your children, your family, your friends, just people who are simply close to you within reach. And sometimes it's the internet when I'm not getting ready for a renovation, but it's just my passion and I want to look for information. Then I can look for them just for myself. But I can also use this time to share it with others, and in this way also bring some value to myself and to society. Well, I think it's just rational. Of course, opinions may be divided, and as for this, well, it sits deep in my heart, and no one knows. These are all very personal things. At first, it's a bit awkward for me to talk about this in the garage. So you're from the class of 93, yes? I'm not from the class of 92, but from the end of it. And now it's time to pack the album, not an outlet one, but it was supposed to be signed, so it's a serious task. Honestly, it always stresses me out, because I don't think I have a very nice signature. And should it be more slanted, or more straight? It's a bit like signing my own book. I mean, for my own library, I don't even know. And making it straight is just hard. Could you talk more about your autism someday? Honestly, I don't have that much to say here because it's hard for me to define the boundary. What is a matter of autism? What is a matter of me? And what might be a matter of some other mental health topics that I just don't know about? On one hand, this margin of error is part of the nature of talking about these topics. But on the other hand, for me, it's frustrating in its own way. So over time, I kind of distanced myself from learning more. In general, I got interested in autism because of some other topics, but not enough to be ready to talk about it publicly. I don't know enough, but if you have any specific questions about autism, let me know, because maybe that's an area where I could say a bit more. Maybe some recommendations regarding radiators? Exactly. Product recommendations are a tricky area because, how should I put it, these products keep changing all the time. And quite a few years ago, at the beginning of the Wnętrza Zewnętrzne channel, I did a review of sofas from IKEA, different types of fold-out sofas. We discussed, among other things, the upholstery and the sofa cover I had. I spoke highly of the fabric, recorded a video, wrote a blog post, and was very satisfied. Then I went to the store a few weeks later, and there was the same model with the same name. Everything was the same, just a different fabric. Not anymore, so everything I said about that fabric became outdated. And of course, I added a correction to the text. I don't remember if I cut out that part in the video. But gosh, well, it is frustrating. So if you're not really up to date with certain products, it's a bit hard to keep up with them. And that's why I don't really want to recommend specific products. They're not really in my area of interest because they're not timeless, unlike the general rules that I usually share with you. Tips: what should you pay attention to? That's timeless, because once you have this knowledge, you can then evaluate all the upcoming product collections that don't even exist yet. And with this general knowledge, you can make the right decisions for yourself. But a specific product? Well, you know, they change, we have different preferences, and it's hard to talk about it. Really, on such a broad scale as we have here. Some trick for hiding larger appliances in the kitchen. That's a really good topic. But let's go back home and then I'll tell you about it. 2 years ago, I went on a hike like that with my friend. We walked 70 kilometers. The thing is, during the first 20 kilometers, my shoes got soaked. Hers did too, by the way. Fortunately, we had her sandals as a backup, just in case, and we dried our shoes on our backpacks and switched them out. Sometimes we walked in our hiking shoes, and sometimes in those sandals, and you'd think that sandals aren't meant for a long hike. On top of that, they were borrowed, which is the worst possible idea. But they were really comfortable, so after 2 years, I finally decided to buy the same ones for myself. I hope they'll be just as comfortable as those were. Some time ago, I started painting a picture that is my mood tracker. Just like the ones you find in journals, calendars, or bullet journals for tracking your mood. That's how I made mine, here. It's just that it's not like each square is one day, but rather each line is one day, and they're not in order, just completely random. And the colors, I choose them according to how my heart feels that day, and there are a whole lot of days here. But I want to show off because I'm already close to the end, it's almost finished. And I'm telling you about this not just to show it off, but because of an observation I have. Because at the beginning, I was painting with various paints that I had, some that I received, some old sets, different paints from the supermarket. And you can see that they just don't cover well. There are these transparent spots. But later, the more I got into it, I started buying better paints at the art supply store. Specifically in the colors I knew I used the most. And I also started using wall paints from those little cans with testers that I already had. I also mixed the colors from the kitchen with other paints in different ways, and that worked great too. So the lower lines are much nicer than the upper ones. And not because I learned how to paint squares because they're still crooked, but because they're just well covered. And this is kind of my appeal to parents. When you buy crayons, paints, or markers for your kids for school, seriously, it's worth paying a bit more and not buying the cheapest ones from the supermarket because they're so crappy that you can end up hating drawing if you have to use products like that. So if you want to encourage your children to enjoy artistic activities, it's definitely better to spend a little more. And they don't have to be really high-end things, but at least not the cheapest supermarket ones. Back to the questions. What's the secret to hiding bigger kitchen appliances? In my opinion, if there's enough space, a great solution can simply be a countertop hidden inside a cabinet. We have a regular kitchenette just behind the cabinet fronts. It could be large fronts that you slide to the side, but it could also just be a regular tall built-in cabinet that doesn't have a lot of shelves inside, just open space. The countertop can be wider so that we can easily work there and use those appliances. They would be permanently plugged in there. We just close it up and they're out of sight, and only the more aesthetic part of the countertop remains visible. Of course, you'll only be able to do this in larger kitchens. In smaller ones, we can use a smaller version of this solution, meaning just a cabinet with a given appliance. It can stand on a pull-out shelf, which would make it more accessible. Of course, there are also more advanced solutions, like those appliances that rise up from the countertop. I showed you something similar in the video about building Barbie's mansion, since it was a huge house. There it was also in a bit of an exaggerated version. At interior design fairs, you can see similar solutions that are more practical. Nevertheless, I still feel like it's a bit overcomplicated, sometimes just a gadget, and I prefer simple solutions that are easy to adapt to another function. If we have equipment hidden in a cabinet, then we can simply turn it into a regular cabinet. For example, if we decided to get rid of the equipment or needed more space in the cabinets. If we have a countertop hidden behind a front panel, we can always remove that panel someday and just have an extra countertop. We can also add shelves inside and turn it into extra cabinets in the future. It's easy to modify if our needs change. But gadgets like this pull-out equipment are difficult to repurpose for another function in the future. And also in terms of possible malfunctions, they're hard to repair. Even at an interior design fair, I remember there was a booth where a lot of people gathered, and there was supposed to be this pull-out equipment, but the button broke and it didn't work. And I can imagine that if I wanted to use the mixer and I couldn't get to it because the pull-out system broke, I would be really frustrated. If the cabinet door breaks, I just take it off with a screwdriver. It's simple, but something like that, I'm not convinced. Obviously, people are different. Some like gadgets, others less so. I'm in the group that likes them less, so it doesn't convince me. But of course, it's good to know that such options exist. In the apartment where I live, my favorite places are the two where I spend the most time. The living room, both at the table and on the sofa, and the bedroom. I love spending time in bed. I often take my computer, work from bed, watch movies in bed. It's just my paradise. A warm comforter, a little table where I keep my tea, an upholstered headboard. It's soft, cozy, and pleasant. So these are my favorite spaces. Since our last episode at home, has the arrangement changed? If so, what changes have taken place, which I also showed in other episodes? Well, the wallpaper in the bedroom, new shelves in the walk-in closet. I made separate episodes about that, and as for some smaller changes, it's even hard for me to say. In my daughter's room, there was a big change because we tore down a wall. That's how it was in my daughter's room. There was this artificial pillar that made the room much less functional, and finally we managed to get rid of it. We managed to fill in the floor, and thanks to that, we could install extra cabinets on the wall in such a way that it was still possible to pull out the bed. So I'm very happy and proud of this change. How do you balance work, kids, and yourself, since all of that is important, I ask. As a single mother, I agree that this is an important topic, but I would also like to emphasize that I am not a single mother. Because we have always operated on the basis of alternating custody with the dad, and our involvement is comparable at a similar level. Well, it's hard to say exactly, but we generally split things about half and half. So by definition, it's a completely different situation than when almost all the childcare falls on one parent. It's just not comparable at all. One week I focus on the kids and try to fit in work, and in other weeks I focus on work and have a lot of time for myself. My life is slow then, and work feels really pleasant. Relaxation. It's completely different because for me, keeping track of the day is really exhausting. I mean, watching the time, knowing that at this hour, something is about to happen. It really disrupts my functioning. I can't focus on what I'm doing because I'm already thinking that I can't miss the deadline soon. Even though I set alarms, it still occupies my mind and memory. But when I don't have to deal with things like school, meals for the kids, extracurricular activities, checking Libras, some message, some documents, and now the doctor, another appointment, when that's not there, every other week I don't have that. So when some people tell me, oh, but I pay child support, it's so hard, it's really not. Earning money is very simple compared to earning money and taking care of children at the same time. So I think that money is not a good compensation. Both parents should be involved. And it's both about the fact that it's not fair when the responsibility for the children falls on one person, and also that children should have relationships with both parents, because why should they lose their bond with one of them just because their parents split up? It's cruel. How can someone not care about their own child? Honestly, topics like this really upset me in my surroundings. Of course, there are also single mothers, but there are also ex-couples with shared custody and couples who have divided things up in completely different ways. For example, the children might live permanently with one parent, but see the other every day, so it's very involving. Because you have to stay in constant contact with the partner you broke up with. The children are the most important, so I can't really accept anything else here. For people who don't pay child support, for people who don't show up for meetings with their children, for people who don't make an effort to maintain contact with their children, that's below a certain standard that I can say is acceptable. Such behavior is definitely not okay, but maybe these aren't the best topics. I expected more questions here. There are still some left in the Tencharsky section, but I have to leave the house now, so we'll talk another time. If you have any questions, write to me. Maybe more personal topics would be better for the supporters section, for videos for supporters. Let me know, follow, like, and see you. Bye.